Our story begins when Hayato, a 19-year-old college student, receives news of the death of his grandmother Sachiko and returns to his hometown, where he's surprised to see that 5 beautiful girls are now living in his childhood home, and accidentally stumbles upon each of them as they're changing. To make matters worse, this first introduction abruptly comes to an end with a swift kick to the face, as the girls mistakenly confuse Hayato for a thief. But when Hayato reawakens shortly after, he's annoyed to see that the girls refuse to untie him, even after he explains that he is Sachiko's grandson, and that he now owns the cafe. In response, Oka, a girl with an abrasive attitude, explains that they are waitresses at Sachiko's cafe, and that Hayato's kind grandmother was like family to them, and even allowed the girls to live with her. Regardless of this, the Chad Hayato informs them that he plans to kick them all out, and turn the cafe into a parking lot. Later that day, the girls vent out their frustration at Hayato's cold-heartedness, until Amy, a girl who's missing a couple brain cells, suddenly realizes that Hayato got to see all of her personality when she kicked him earlier. That's when Riho realizes that all men are apes, and that they can use Hayato's chimp brain against him by seducing him. So as part of Rio's plan, Oka barges into Hayato's room in a maid outfit, and offers to cook her master some delicious pilaf rice. To her surprise, however, Hayato is completely unfazed by this seduction technique, which causes her to briefly break character, but she stops herself before insulting him. When Hayato then confronts the girls about their horrible plan to seduce him, Amy suddenly arrives in short shorts and invites him to go on a nightly jog with her. But her provocative outfit just makes Hayato embarrassed for her, which in turn greatly embarrasses Amy too. Later that night, as Hayato tries to sleep, he's rudely awakened by a drunk Shirigiku, who claims to love the manly smell of Hayato's musky room, and says she's always loved him, which surprises Hayato as he's only just met her. This was of course all orchestrated by the cunning Riho, who got Shirigiku drunk knowing that she would go wild, so she could snap a picture of the 2 lovebirds together and blackmail Hayato with it. Unfortunately, Amy barges into Hayato's room before the plan can come to fruition, and beats him up while proclaiming herself the defender of all women. The next morning, Amy apologizes for ruining Riho's master plan, to which Hayato replies that she should be apologizing to Shirigiku instead. But it turns out that Shirigiku has no recollection of the previous night's impure events, which is kind of a relief to Hayato. But with the girls' plans all failing one after the other, Hayato brings in professionals to determine how much it would cost to demolish the house and cafe, while the girls can only stand back and watch in horror. But when one of the men accidentally breaks the cafe's sign, Hayato suddenly has a flashback to the time where his grandmother told him that she named her cafe Familia, which means family in Spanish, and that the guests who come to the cafe will be their families. At that moment, Akane, a laid-back musician, notices the change in Hayato's expression, and hurriedly asks Oka to prepare pilaf rice for him. And eating this meal brings tears to his eyes, as he recalls how, after the unexpected death of his parents, he witnessed Grandma Sachiko borrowing money to open the cafe in order to provide for him. From that moment on, Hayato focused on becoming a successful businessman so he could give Grandma Sachiko a better life. But unfortunately, she passed away before he could accomplish that. Meanwhile, Oka overhears Hayato lamenting the loss of his grandmother, and realizes that he's not such a bad guy after all. Afterwards, Oka is glad to see that Hayato ate everything she cooked for him, but her mood quickly changes when he bluntly tells her that the taste was just mediocre. Hayato then gathers the girls and informs them that he'll be reopening the cafe in his grandmother's honor, but that he'll still turn it into a parking lot if it can't turn a profit within 1 year. But when Oka then learns that this also means he will be moving in with them, the Chad Hayato tells her that she can just eat dirt if she's unhappy. But living with girls proves far more difficult than he expected, especially when they come up with all kinds of excuses to avoid doing any housework, like Riho not wanting to break her manicured nails. But when Shirigiku volunteers to do all the cooking and cleaning herself, Hayato immediately shuts this idea down, and calls out the other girls for taking advantage of Shirigiku's kindness. But even when he manages to convince the girls to help him clean, Hayato still finds himself having to babysit them, and even eats a kick to the face from Oka after accidentally catching a glimpse of what's under her skirt. Later that night, Hayato agrees to have dinner with the girls, and although this meal with them proves to be a rare time of peacefulness, Hayato's life soon returns to chaos when Oka accidentally barges in on him bathing after dinner, and he's once again attacked by Amy, who proclaims herself the defender of world peace. The next day, before the cafe officially reopens, Hayato arrogantly decides to show the girls how to properly run the cafe and make delicious coffee, which he feels confident he can accomplish after watching his grandmother do it for years. To his surprise, however, the coffee he makes turns out completely bland, which is harshly mocked by Akane. Later that night, however, an annoyed Hayato asks Akane to make him a cup of coffee so he can mock her skills too. But when it turns out that her coffee is just as delicious as Grandma Sachiko's, Hayato is forced to embarrassingly ask Akane to teach him how to make proper coffee. But upon seeing his reaction, Akane compliments him on making such a cute face, which embarrasses him further. And when she then smiles and agrees to teach him, Hayato attempts to embarrass her by saying she looks cute when she smiles. But Akane has no reaction and simply thanks him, which annoys him further. After Hayato leaves, however, Akane is shown to be quite flustered. The next day, Hayato takes Riho with him to inform the cafe's regular customers and business partners that Cafe Familia is reopening soon. But throughout the day, Hayato's arrogant and stoic demeanor gives off the wrong vibes, and Riho is forced to act cute and kind to make up for his antisocial energy. And after a long day of covering up for Hayato, Riho scolds him for his moody and disrespectful attitude. Surprisingly, however, Hayato agrees with her after reflecting on it for a short while, and promises to do better right away. Seeing this, Riho is taken aback by Hayato's maturity and commitment to the cafe, and as he's leaving to go apologize to his business partners, Riho decides to reward him by showing him a heavenly sight that almost sends him straight to heaven too. The next few days, as Hayato tries to become more acquainted with the girls, he finds himself constantly arguing with Oka, and there always seems to be friction between them. Afraid that the customers will see them quarrel all the time when the cafe officially reopens, Riho persuades Hayato to try and get along with Oka by complimenting her more. When he tries to compliment her, however, Oka notices Hayato's weird expression, and mistakenly believes that he's mocking her, which just makes her even angrier. But when he later finds Oka in her waitress uniform, he sincerely compliments her as cute, which makes her smile as Oka is a fashion school student, and had actually made the cafe's outfits herself. Unfortunately, their tender moment is soon ruined by a drunk Shiragiku, who wishes to delight in Hayato's smell, a moment which is embarrassingly caught in 4K by Amy. The day before the cafe's opening, Hayato pays the girls the previous month's salary in place of Grandma Sachiko, and reveals that he's made some money thanks to the stock market, which Amy is a little bit too eager to learn more about. Unfortunately for him, Amy accidentally breaks Hayato's phone and laptop by serving tea while holding dumbbells at the same time, and does everything in her power to distract him from finding this out, including wearing some tight revealing clothes. To make matters worse, this prevents Hayato from selling his stocks in a suddenly bankrupt company, which completely wipes out his savings, and leaves Hayato entirely dependent on Cafe Familia becoming financially successful. And although Amy jokingly offers her luscious melons to ease Hayato's pain, this offer is promptly rejected. The next day, however, the cafe finally reopens, and both the uniforms and the taste of the coffee are well received, with many customers left elated by this experience, until the arrival of Fuwa, the loan shark who always harassed Grandma Sachiko over the money she owed him. But when Fuwa mocks Hayato and claims that running a cafe is a futile effort, he does his best to endure it and treat the customer as king, and even stops the girls from hitting Fuwa when he insults Grandma Sachiko. However, when Fuwa attempts to show dominance by intentionally flipping up Shiragiku's dress, Hayato throws him out of his cafe and threatens to blackmail him if he ever returns. And upon seeing this, the girls grow even more fond of Hayato, while Shiragiku in particular thinks about how Hayato hasn't changed at all since they were kids. But despite their wonderful first few days since opening, the cafe begins to steadily lose customers every day. And in order to turn this around, Hayato has the idea to participate in the Cherry Blossom Festival by setting up a stall on weekends, and asks the girls for help developing new menu items to attract new customers. And since Shiragiku is the best chef among the group, she attempts to fulfill this request by creating cherry liqueur cookies, but accidentally gets drunk while tasting them, and once again finds herself fascinated by Hayato's manly smell. Luckily, or maybe unluckily, Riho notices Shiragiku's condition and quickly puts a stop to her madness, while destroying the cookies in the process. So instead of using Shiragiku's cookies, Akane decides to give Hayato a cookie recipe that she had developed with Grandma Sachiko. That weekend, Hayato takes Amy and Oka to the Cherry Blossom Festival to open and run their stall, but soon encounter Fuwa's grandson and his thugs, who attempt to harass them. Fortunately, the vendors around are all friends of Grandma Sachiko and help drive the thugs away. And although they avoided the crisis for a little while, the humiliated thugs return later that night to secretly vandalize Cafe Familia's stalls. The next day, however, Hayato doesn't let this get him down, as he recalls that Grandma Sachiko had an old food cart, which he and Oka quickly spruce up into a mobile cafe stall that becomes a roaring success thanks to Riho's social media skills. And when the coffee beans and cookies in the cart run out, the overly energetic Amy is tasked with sprinting back to get more. But on their way home after a long and successful day, the gang run into the thugs again, who attempt to harass them once more. However, Hayato knows the law very well, and knows that it's best for them not to initiate an attack. Instead, he deliberately shows weakness and lets Fuwa's grandson punch him. But on the pretense of self-defense, Hayato orders Amy to beat up the thugs, which she does in several swift movements, causing them to run away in fear. Oka is amazed by Hayato's quick thinking, but when he says he just doesn't want those thugs to smash the beautiful cart she worked so hard to make, Oka feels incredibly touched. A few days later, Hayato notices that Riho is working way too hard in both college and the cafe. And when he confronts her about this later that night, she reveals that she feels incredibly grateful to Grandma Sachiko and wants to do everything she can to help the cafe succeed. And as the two talk, Riho thinks back to when her mother told her that those who don't work hard are worthless. But when Hayato tells her that she should live her life for herself and not for others, she is reminded of Grandma Sachiko, making her think that Hayato might actually be a reliable guy. The next day, Hayato learns that Akane plays in a band on her days off, but for some reason she's never let the other girls attend her concerts. By complete chance, however, Hayato comes across one of her underground concerts, and finds that despite her usual antisocial vibes, she is actually a very passionate and talented singer. After the show, Hayato calls out to Akane, who immediately feels shocked and embarrassed. She then asks Hayato to keep her music a secret from the other girls, as she's not ready to tell them about it yet. Hayato respects Akane's decision and grants her request. But shortly after, Akane grows even more embarrassed when Hayato reveals that he liked her music so much that he's bought one of her CDs. Sometime later, while Hayato is out of the house, the girls discuss the dangers of living with a man, and come to the conclusion that Hayato is not the kind of guy to try something shady. But while talking, Akane suddenly claims that she wouldn't mind marrying Hayato, which greatly shocks the girls. She quickly retracts this statement, however, and says it was just a joke. But the girls aren't so convinced. A few days later, when the girls suddenly start acting coldly towards Hayato, he realizes that despite appearances, the girls are just employees and not his family. But when he goes to tell them so, he finds that the girls had secretly planned a party to celebrate the cafe's 2-month anniversary, and to thank Hayato for being such a great manager. Touched by this act, Hayato realizes that the girls are his family after all. Towards the end of the party, however, Akane receives a call from her mother, which for some reason greatly upsets her. During the following days, Hayato deduces from Akane's behavior that she's planning to quit and move out due to her mother. And when he confronts her about this, Akane says she's grateful for everything Hayato's done for her, and jokingly offers melon squeezing as repayment. But Hayato instead asks her for a date. And when the other girls discover the secret date, they of course grow quite suspicious. But on the date, Akane realizes that this is just a way for Hayato to get her to share her problems. She eventually reveals that she comes from an incredibly rich family, but since her father died, she is the sole heir of her father's lucrative business, and her mother has chosen a fiancé for her and is now pressuring her to have children and start a family. Hayato, of course, doesn't want Akane to leave, and knows that she doesn't want to leave either. The girls, who are eavesdropping, also agree that Akane can't leave, and beg Hayato to do something about this. So the next day, they meet with Akane's mother to put an end to the arranged marriage. But when Akane is unable to speak her mind and confront her mother, Hayato gives her a harsh scolding that she needs to grow up and start standing up for herself. Thanks to his words, Akane finally gains the courage to defy her mother and tells her she doesn't want to leave the cafe. Surprisingly, her mother relents and tells Akane that she can live as she pleases. Meanwhile, the other girls are relieved to hear that Akane is staying after all. As Akane's mother leaves, however, she cheerfully points out that if Akane wants to marry Hayato, she'll need to defeat the other girls first, which flusters Akane. Shortly after, Akane thanks Hayato by hugging him, and promises to make his coffee for him for the rest of his life. An embarrassed Hayato warns her not to make fun of him, and leaves. Delighted by his reaction, Akane can't deny her feelings for Hayato any longer. A few days later, Akane surprises Hayato by suddenly asking about his romantic future. Embarrassed, Hayato claims he won't think about that until Cafe Familia's future is decided. And after hearing this, Akane accepts that now's not the right time to confess her love to him, which is overheard by Shiragiku. Shortly after, the house's bathtub breaks, so the gang must bathe at a nearby bathhouse while Hayato agrees to install a new bath and toilet. At the bathhouse, however, the girls overhear the men talking, and are embarrassed to learn that Hayato's manhood is larger than average. But the conversation quickly turns more serious when Akane informs Riho that she plans to confess to Hayato soon, so if she loves Hayato as well, then she needs to let him know soon. With this, Rio gains the courage to finally confess her feelings to Hayato later that night, though she instantly claims to be joking. However, Hayato becomes embarrassed and uncomfortable, and repeats that he won't think about romance until the cafe's future is decided. With no other choice, Riho accepts this decision, but loses her temper the next day when she sees Akane now openly flirting with Hayato. Their rivalry is noticed by customers, so Amy steps in to calm them down and force them to apologize to each other, leading Akane to admit that she provoked Riho on purpose so she would be honest about her feelings, and the two girls agree to be civilized rivals from now on. Meanwhile, Hayato is left confused and afraid that he did something wrong. A few days later, Hayato decides to create another new menu item. But when Akane and Riho try to help, they quickly notice that Hayato doesn't trust either of them, because of their recent rivalry behavior. Later that same day, an annoyed and drunk Shiragiku abruptly confesses her love to Hayato as well, before promptly passing out. When she reawakens, however, Hayato demands to ask what's going on with her. That's when Shiragiku's flashback shows that Grandma Sachiko was once an exceptionally gifted chef in Spain who even mentored Shiragiku's father, which is how Shiragiku first met Hayato as children. But Grandma Sachiko never wanted Hayato to know she had to quit her dream of being a chef to raise him. Despite not knowing this, Hayato had always blamed himself for ruining Grandma Sachiko's life. But Shiragiku reassures him that Grandma Sachiko never once regretted choosing to raise him. And with this, Hayato's resolve is strengthened further, and he decides that he simply can't let Cafe Familia fail, no matter what. Meanwhile, the other girls, who are all revealed to have been eavesdropping, tearfully agree to do whatever it takes to make the cafe thrive, though their emotional outbursts only cause Hayato to yell in frustration. In a flash forward, we suddenly see Hayato a few years later, still working at Cafe Familia, though now with his teenage daughter. But which of the 5 girls he ended up marrying is left a mystery. Thanks for watching this anime recap, and I hope to see you again in the next one.